Last week, Commander-in-Chief Carney dropped our retaliatory tariffs against the United States.
Sarah, that's right. We're now getting a reaction from the White House to those reports that Canada is going to pull back on its retaliatory tariffs.
We have extensive coverage and analysis of the Prime Minister's announcement.
You just can't make this stuff up.
We've been taken advantage of for too long.
He's not thrown one elbow since he took office.
Interesting.
I think it's pretty ridiculous and a slap in the face.
I believe in Trump.
You're subsidizing Canada.
His elbows have mysteriously gone missing.
I am so sick of American tariff news. I cannot keep up. And if you feel anything like me, now is the time to buckle up, because we're not just in one trade war. We're in two. We've got beef with our two biggest customers.
China is taking aim at Canadian canola farmers.
There are 40,000 canola farmers in Canada who have just been hit.
China slapped a duty of nearly 76% on canola seed.
It's a trade relationship that was worth more than $5 billion last year.
So far, the federal government has not announced any help for canola farmers.
Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe says he will travel to China soon for talks to persuade Beijing to drop new tariffs on Canada.
Chinese officials accuse Canada of dumping cheap canola into their market. However, it is widely believed this is in retaliation over Canada's 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles.
If it feels like the Chinese canola tariffs came out of nowhere, they didn't. In 2024, Justin Trudeau accused China of deliberately kneecapping our EV sector after getting pressured from our auto industry.
Shortly, we will be introducing a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles.
So we tariffed the shit out of Chinese EVs. It was about protecting Canadian workers.
The standing up for Canadian jobs and Canadian interests, not just for the short term, but for the long term, is exactly what we need to do.
But it was also about keeping Washington happy. And let's just say, China didn't really take it that well. It accused us of undercutting Chinese producers and flooding its markets with goods. And then in March came phase one of their retaliation.
Well, Canada's economy got hit with new tariffs today, but this time the duties are not coming from the Trump administration. Instead, they come from the People's Republic of China.
China imposed 100% tariffs on all sorts of products, including canola oil, oil cakes, and peas. That brings us here.
Frustrated farmers are reacting this morning to another set of canola tariffs imposed by China.
To phase two. Now, China's going after canola seed, what we export the most, just months before harvest. These tariffs would cripple Canadian farmers. But this tit for tat is about more than just canola. China's playing us. They're pitting two sides of the country against each other. And we shouldn't take the bait. At least, that's what Vina Nadjibulla thinks. This episode, I'm talking to her. Vina Nadjibulla has got over 2 decades of experience in international security and crisis management in places like Canada, the United States, China, and Central Asia. She's the Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia Pacific Foundation, an independent think tank on Canada's relationship with Asia, and sometimes they give policy advice to the federal government. Vina's job basically involves arriving at informed positions on Canada-China affairs. And in a minute, she'll tell you why she thinks China is playing us. She also campaigned publicly for the release of her ex-husband, Michael Kovrig, who was held in China for over 1,000 days between 2018 and 2021. Let's get into it. Vina, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
To maybe a regular layperson, canola feels like a bit of a weird thing for Canada and China to have a trade spat over. Why canola?
Let's start with the fact that canola is actually a huge and important industry for Canada. So we are speaking at a time when I'm in Vancouver and in Western Canada. Canola is a pretty big deal. It's a $45 billion industry. It employs about 200,000 people. And we're very good at it. We're one of the largest exporters of canola globally. Now, China is one of the largest consumers of canola globally. They're obviously a very large country with 1.4 billion people and happen to use a lot of vegetable oils in general, culturally in their cooking, and import a lot of it from lots of places, but also China. So that's why whenever there is any kind of a political issue between Canada and China, we saw this also back in 2018 to 2021, China retaliates by taking an action in limiting Canadian exports to China because they know that it will hurt.
What was their justification?
They're saying that it's an anti-dumping move in that Canada sells canola at below market price in China and at a price, that is higher than we sell here. So they are trying to sort of do this within. No. So, I mean, and everybody knows that. I mean, it's the kind of thing, there's no this is not a kind of agricultural dispute. This is very much a political issue.
But I'm having a hard time with this because it feels like we started it. We accused them of purposefully undermining Canada's EV sector. We dropped an 100% tariff on their EVs, a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. It feels like Canada started this. Are we not the aggressor right now?
No. So, I mean, I can see why it feels that way. And that's certainly what China would like us to believe, that this is all our own doing because we wanted to align with the U.S. No, we have to take certain measures when it comes to China to protect our economic security and national security, right? So EVs are not just about EVs. They're also essentially computers on wheels. So there are national security concerns to deal with. There also are part of an industry, a future industry, right? EVs, batteries, like advanced technologies. We need to be able to have a stake in that. If we want Canada to be an industrialized country 20 years down the road, we have to be able to invest in those advanced technologies and manufacturing capacity. And China has systematically undermined other countries' ability to compete in those fields.
How so?
By essentially producing and selling at below market prices. Their whole economy is structured around production and manufacturing and suppression of domestic consumption and wages and so forth. The global trading order has benefited China greatly, but China hasn't played by the rules. The real issue obviously goes way back with China joining the WTO and China using the international rules-based trade to essentially promote its own economic growth at a cost to other economies and deindustrialization of other economies. So China overproduces things from solar panels to now EVs and dumps them basically into other markets, thus undermining competitiveness in industries in those markets.
But I feel like when everyday Canadians, even me, like a regular layperson, hears that we're protecting our EV industry, but China's is much better. I've driven a Chinese car. There are beautiful cars. They're extremely cheap. So how do you bring this down to like regular people terms? Like, okay, they're abusing the markets. Who cares? I want a nicer car for less money. Yeah, how do you make that make sense for regular people?
Yeah, I mean, listen, and there's always kind of trade-offs and different perspectives. So from a consumer's perspective, obviously having good products at a cheap price is the best thing. But when a decision maker in Ottawa, when Prime Minister Carney or Minister of Industry of Foreign Affairs, when they're making decisions, they have to think of the whole economy and the health and resilience of Canadian economy today, but also 20 years from now, right? It's like, what kind of country do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a country that only exports raw materials and basically deindustrializes and doesn't have a hope of competing in 15 or 10 years from now? Or do you want to live in a country that is an advanced economy that provides good jobs for everybody, not just for one sector of exports in agriculture and energy? You can't look at everything just from a perspective of consumer. It's also about, do I live in a safe country where people are not surveilling me and are not using that card to control my movements and or to undermine national security in my country and my own personal security as well, right? So yes, cheaper prices matter. Yes, making sure that we do everything possible on the climate agenda and decarbonization matters. But how we pursue that also has to be considered, right?
Okay, noted. I guess I won't get a affordable, beautiful looking Chinese EV in my lifetime, maybe, but what's the end game here? Like, they're imposing the canola tariffs to what end? So we back out of our EV tariffs?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, clearly. That's exactly what they're doing. When a country does something that China doesn't like, they retaliate, and they retaliate strategically and in a way that will hurt the most. With Canada, China, we've seen that when that happens, like for instance in 2018, when we detained the Chinese CFO of Huawei here in Canada, China's reaction was not only to detain Canadians arbitrarily and unjustly.
Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig were arbitrarily detained in China following the arrest of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou.
But also to hit us on canola, where, again, it hurts economically the most. So when the EV action was taken, they're basically saying, look, you should have never put this EV tariffs. And so we're now going to do this. And we're doing it provisionally so that it's very clear that the way out would be for you to remove your 100% tariffs on EVs and on steel. And that's exactly what some are calling in Canada, right? So this becomes then a fight between Ontario and Quebec and Western Canada rather than a dispute between Canada and China. Like, we got to keep our eyes on the ball here, right? This isn't about like, who do you like more, Ontario, Quebec, auto workers or Western farmers?
Why do you think that's intentional, this pitting them against each other rather than just a straightforward response for retaliation?
Well, it's strategic because then it increases the pressure, right? So it essentially makes it as if though the issue is protect Ontario or Quebec or protect Western Canada. And since canola is a larger industry, therefore we should just do that. It takes advantage of the cleavages that are already there, right? It's strategic in that there are obviously sense of grievance, real and perceived, about the fact that Ottawa is not as attuned to the realities and the kind of interests of Western Canada. And a tariff like this is doing exactly what China would like it to do. It basically has premiers of Western Canada calling on Ottawa to step in and to basically take their side, because this is a larger, in today's terms, larger sector that's impacted, right? Whereas it shouldn't be even framed that way. That's not the right framing of the issue. The framing of the issue is, how can Canada preserve its economic growth and economic resilience and economic security in the face of China that is competing without following rules in a way that is undermining international trading order and is using coercive measures in retaliation to what we are doing essentially to protect ourselves. And I can see how like some would say, oh, but we're doing the same thing. We're not. We're not ultimately dumping into China. We're not overproducing. We're not subsidizing our sectors in the same way, and so on. Again, this is not something that's happening to us for the first time or that's happening to us alone. Like, we went through this 5 years ago. Other countries, Australia, Japan, Norway, they are going through this as well. So this is a classic Chinese playbook. And we have to resist that, falling into that trap.
But if you're a prairie farmer right now watching or your livelihood threatened, it may be hard to hear like a conversation like this where it's like, okay, Canada shouldn't take the bait. We should just figure out a different play. So essentially what you're saying, in the short term, it may suck, but for the long game, we may benefit? Yeah, how do you explain that?
And that's a really good question. And I think we haven't yet spoken about this, but just because I'm saying we don't need to take the bait and concede to China doesn't mean that we shouldn't be supporting our canola farmers and looking at ways to provide short-term relief, because the time of these tariffs is extremely damaging. It's coming right before harvest, and it's already undermining prices for farmers. So we have to be real, and that there's going to be economic pain that those folks are going to feel, and therefore both provincial and federal government have to step in to help. And longer term, what needs to happen is we need to recognize that as painful as it is, we have to de-risk from both the US and China. Now, that's not easy to say. And by de-risk, I mean reduce over-reliance. In other words, we can't not sell to US and China. These are huge markets, and of course our largest markets. But we shouldn't be selling sort of 60% or 90% of one product to one market. In a current environment, countries like China and US even are starting to weaponize that kind of overdependence. So we have to de-risk and diversify. That's going to take time. We also have to move up the value chain, do a lot more processing of canola, look at other things we can do, use it for biofuel, use it for proteins. So essentially be much more creative, and also then obviously work to sell to other markets. So when this happened in 2019, our exports to other markets like UAE in the Middle East went up, because ultimately canola there's a global market for it, and China still has to buy it from somewhere, right? So if they buy it from Australia, which is what they're doing now, then that means Australia can sell to other places. So those other places have to buy from us, right? Like ultimately we are a big producer of this crop, and China is a big consumer. If they don't buy directly from us, they'll buy from somewhere else.
It seems like not only are they pitting the east and west of Canada against each other, but now switching from the Canadian market into the Australian feels like almost a similar play, pitting Western countries, allies, against each other. How do you make sense of that decision?
We've done the same thing, unfortunately. When China hit Australia with economic coercive measures, then they went to Canada and Europe and other places to backfill as well. And while China is able to exploit us, I think the real opportunity here, Noor, is imagine a world in which democracies actually were in solidarity with each other and actually coordinated these kinds of things and had joined measures to deal with this and not fall for these kinds of sort of moves by countries like China or even the US right now, right? Like imagine a world in which people were not negotiating bilaterally with President Trump, but actually Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Canada all came together and said, let's coordinate our negotiating strategies with anyone, be that US or China, that tries to bully and coerce others. That would be a world I'd like to see.
Yeah, I think keyword here is imagine. Yeah, imagine what we could do if we could actually
work together.
Shit together. Yeah, exactly. I mean, how does Mark Carney fit into this equation? You know, he's a new leader. What's his relationship to China, and how do you anticipate him navigating this?
Yeah, so I think Prime Minister Carney, when he came into office, he sort of signaled that Canada would need to engage in diplomacy differently than we've done before, because we find ourselves in a really kind of generational moment when the disruptions both at home and abroad are so high that we have to reevaluate how we engage, and we have to work from a place of national interest and be much more pragmatic. So in other words, he was already saying that he wants to recalibrate the relationship with China, that he wants to have dialogue at the highest levels with Chinese leaders. And I think that's the right thing. What's important is to say that, okay, yes, we want to have dialogue, but we can now be seen as to kind of rushing to have conversations with China to find, quote unquote, a resolution and to concede too much and to come to the table from a position of weakness. It's important for him to essentially say, yes, it's in Canada's interest to recalibrate relations with China, to have open channels of communication, to be able to have tough conversations with each other. But it shouldn't be now sort of seen as, okay, China retaliated, Canada's caving, and Canada's rushing to have a meeting and essentially concede. That, I think, would be a mistake.
And what have we noticed in China's relationship with Carney. I saw the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson say this after Carney was elected, quote, China is willing to develop China-Canada relations on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit, end quote. Seems like a bit of a pile of horseshit now that we're sitting here in the midst of a tariff spat. How do you make sense of their statement?
Well, so, Noor, there are people who've dedicated their entire academic and professional careers in deciphering Chinese language and statements, diplomatic language and statements, right?
Yeah.
Because those words are not what they sound like, right? So the meaning is not what the words would imply.
So translate for me. Translate for me.
Because this idea that, there are no conflicts of interest between Canada and China. I mean, obviously that's not true. Like I've named a few of them, foreign interference being one, support that China provides to Russia. Basically, China is an enabler of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Like Russia would not be able to sustain that without China, right? So what China is doing in South China Sea and undermining maritime law and security of shipping lanes is a threat to us. What China is doing vis-a-vis Taiwan is a threat to us, both economically, but also from a place of democratic solidarity. And again, I need to go back to transnational repression and foreign interference, which is probably the most acute issue, as well as cyber threat, IP theft, right? So there is a whole host of things, behaviors the Chinese Communist Party engages in that are problematic from Canada's national interest and a threat and a challenge to us, right? So this idea that there's no differences, we can be friendly as long as Canada has the quote unquote correct perception. And the correct perception basically means see the world as we see it. See basically Taiwan as part of China, see South China Sea as China's lake, basically sort of see all behaviors of China as benign, and anything that is not to your liking clearly comes from a perception that you don't have the correct cognition about it. So just reframe how you look at it and there will be no problems. Yes, if we always agree with China, there will be no problems. But the trouble is that would come at a cost to our sovereignty and our security.
Where do we go from here? Because it seems like not only are we dealing with China, we're also dealing with the United States. So it feels like almost impossible to deal with these two things at once. I was doing a little digging on your LinkedIn earlier to write your bio, and I found out your favorite saying is, where there's a will, there is a way. I'm curious, do you think there is a way here with China?
Well, and I think, Noor, you framed it correctly that we're dealing with the U.S. and with China, and we're dealing with the unraveling of the global rules-based trading order, as well as kind of the global order that we've become accustomed to, right? Like Canada has been extremely privileged. But for the last 50 years, Canada and Canadians have enjoyed so much prosperity, so much safety, that it was easy for us to take all of that for granted and become complacent, become very comfortable, kind of just hope that things will continue in that way. Well, unfortunately, that's not the reality. The world is no longer safe for us in the way that it has been. Liberal democracy is under threat, both here and globally. And we now have to adjust to that, which means we need to invest a lot more in our own security, our own defense. We need to invest a lot more in our leadership and capacity to engage in diplomacy, to be able to properly advocate for Canada's interests and protect Canadian values. Anybody right now says to you there is an easy way out of this trade dispute with the U.S. and China, I don't think they're being honest or they're being extremely naive. This isn't going to be easy. What's happening with the U.S. is, a serious threat, a challenge to our economy and our way of life. What's happening with China predates the crisis with the U.S., right? China has been a problem and continues to be a problem. And the solution is not to say, you know what, the issues with the U.S. are so big, let's just make nice with China, let's align with China. That's not going to work either.
I was just going to say, I've seen it argued that we should, free ourselves of the United States and forge closer ties with China. So should we?
No, I'm afraid. No. So there are not many things that I'm 110% sure of. That is one of them. Like the solution to our problems with the U.S. and Trump administration is not going to be found with Beijing and in China.
Vina, it was wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you so much for the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
There is always so much politics news to keep up with, so we've got Sam, our producer and Ottawa correspondent, here to get us up to speed. Sam, lovely having you. Lovely
nice to be
you.
here in these dog days of summer.
In these dog days. What is up?
Yeah, a few things kind of on my radar this week. I know off the top of the show you mentioned that Carney is taking away retaliatory tariffs on most U.S. goods next month.
Actually, Canada is taking away some retaliatory tariffs.
He's removing his tariffs, yeah.
Exactly.
He's removing his retaliatory tariffs, which I thought was nice. And we're going to have another call soon. Okay. Yeah, we had a very good call.
You're getting closer towards an agreement. I like him.
But I feel like I'm going to take 5 seconds and actually explain what that means because it's very confusing.
I appreciate the service you're doing for us.
News you can use.
Exactly. What does it mean? What do the elbows down on retaliatory tariffs mean?
Yeah, so if you remember in March, Ottawa hit back at Washington.
I am announcing that the Government of Canada, following a dollar-for-dollar approach, will be imposing, as of 12:01 a.m. tomorrow, March 13th, 2025, 25% reciprocal tariffs on an additional $29.8 billion of imports from the United States.
You remember that?
Yep, take that.
That move came after the U.S. threatened to tax all Canadian exports at the same rate. In the end, that tariff only applied to products that didn't comply with the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement, which is also known as CUSMA. Mm-hmm. Then, on August 1st...
President Trump announcing tariffs on imports from Canada of 35%. Something must have made him mad.
Washington raised those tariffs again out of the blue to 35%. Now, Carney said Canada's retaliatory measures will be lifted for CUSMA-compliant goods coming to Canada from the U.S. starting on September 1st. I know that is confusing.
No, I get the timeline, but I'm confused. What are CUSMA-compliant goods? What falls under this category?
Okay, it is a huge list. I'll put a link with the whole list in the show notes, so if listeners are curious, they can go check that out. Cool. But poultry goods, dairy products, coffee, tea, spices, a ton of food-related products, a lot of clothing, cigarettes, vapes.
Cigarettes!
Socks.
Not
cigarettes! Alcohol products, lots of cosmetics, building materials.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot.
But one thing that we are not taking off that is important to note is that we are keeping our tariffs on steel, aluminum, and auto stuff.
Stuff you make cars with.
Stuff you make cars with. And then that is ongoing as the Liberals are trying to work with the U.S. to get kind of a new trading relationship going between the two countries, whatever that looks like.
You know...
I know what you're going to say. Can we say it together?
Me, you, and Pierre Poilievre all at once. Ready?
1, 2, 3. Elbows down.
Elbows down.
He really, he loves this almost as much as saying, Justin Trudeau. Elbows down and Justin Trudeau are on the same
wave.
The same level. Yeah. Well, what else is going on other than the hell that is our trade wars?
So Carney's having a little bit of a Euro week this week.
A Euro summer.
Euro summer. He's in Germany with the Energy Minister Tim Hodgson and Defense Minister David McGuinty. And today Hodgson is in Berlin meeting with executives from a bunch of different manufacturing, energy, and defense companies. So what this trip is, it's really focused on trying to diversify our energy and critical minerals. Germany's obviously interested in our rare earth minerals, and because they have a huge clean energy technology industry and electric vehicles. But the reason why David McGuinty is there as well is because Germany needs to power the build out of this huge military hardware industry because they're trying to meet that NATO target of 5%.
Yeah.
And then the Germans are still weaning themselves off Russian gas. So there is a hole to fill for the Canadians in the German market. So critical minerals, energy, defense stuff, all on the docket for Carney and co. this week.
You know, when I think of like a girls or a boys trip to Berlin, energy, rare earth minerals aren't what come to mind.
No.
Maybe
a specific type of rare minerals.
Yeah, I was just about to say. But yeah, that does sound like a very fun work trip for people who are interested in rare earth minerals and NATO spending.
Yeah. Do you think Carney goes to the club when he visits Berlin?
Wait, what's that club called? Do they let him in?
Berghain?
Yeah. Do you think they let him in?
Yeah, some real serious geopolitical deal making going on in the fetish room at Berghain.
Oh my God, I love it. Okay.
Okay, moving on. Noor, there's one more thing that I think didn't get a ton of attention in Canadian news, but it was all over CNN this weekend, and I do think it is important to note. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence in the U.S., issued a directive weeks ago that was recently uncovered by CBS News. And the intelligence community ordered that all information regarding the Russia-Ukraine peace negotiations not be shared with the Five Eyes, which is the U.S. allied intelligence partners, which Canada is a part of. So the Five Eyes is an information network, and they collect all the information through surveillance, spying, satellites, and other intelligence methods. It started during World War II when the US and UK agreed to share their secret signals, intelligence, and things like that. And later on...
This is a super secret spy group.
It's a super secret spy group. Later on, Canada, the US, and New Zealand joined. And this is obviously a huge deal. A lot of former US government officials were warning that Gabbard's order could undermine the Five Eyes and really discourage kind of trust between the five intelligence groups from sharing intel, and that would ultimately erode trust in our biggest allies. And also, it's important to note that this isn't like a one-sided affair. Like, Canada and the UK do provide a lot of intelligence to the US, so it's not like we're getting carried by the US. It's like there is very much a transactional relationship here. After CBS News published its report, the director of national intelligence spokesperson said on Twitter or X or whatever you call it, that CBS's report was false, and the U.S. and quote, U.S. intelligence sharing relationship with our allies has never been stronger. Fake news.
Yeah, like if you say so, sure.
Yeah.
Kick us out of the secret spy group or not tell us what's going on in the
super secret spy group.
Literally.
You kick me out of my super secret spy group?
Oh my God, these people are strange. Well, I'll see you next week.
Smell you later.
Smell you later. That's been This Week in Canadian Politics. If you like this episode, please let us know by leaving us a like or a comment. You can even subscribe and hit the bell if you want to be notified whenever we post a YouTube video on our YouTube channel for our YouTube audience. If you exist, if you are watching this on YouTube, I want you to email me at noor@canadaland.com, and I want you to tell me what you like about our videos, what you don't, how we can do them better, or you can just tell me you really love them. You can support the show if you go to canadaland.com/join. You know, if you want to support us. Bye now!